Type 2 diabetes. You may have heard it called simply diabetes. It can be quite a difficult condition to live with and cause a lot of problems later on in life. But did you know that type 2 diabetes can be prevented? Diabetes can be treated, but you have to monitor your blood glucose levels and even inject insulin. Prevention, however, is far easier and safer than treatment, and 3 in 5 cases of type 2 diabetes can be prevented or delayed. Before we start talking about prevention, what actually is type 2 diabetes? Diabetes affects how the body responds to and makes insulin. The hormone insulin is a signalling molecule produced by the pancreas. In a healthy person, insulin is secreted into the blood and stimulates cells to take up glucose, which they break down to provide them with energy. Insulin is therefore responsible for lowering blood glucose levels. 10% of diabetes patients have type 1 diabetes. As this is an autoimmune condition, type 1 diabetes cannot be prevented. However, 90% of all diabetes patients have type 2 diabetes, and it can be prevented. In type 2 diabetes, the body can produce insulin, but it doesn't work effectively for 2 reasons. Firstly, your cells can become resistant to insulin. Insulin may bind to cells, but they are unresponsive to its effects. Secondly, the pancreas may not produce enough insulin, and body cells aren't stimulated strongly to take up glucose. Therefore, due to low levels of insulin or insulin resistance, glucose is not taken up by cells or broken down, causing glucose levels in the blood to become too high. High blood sugar levels cause symptoms such as urinating more often than usual, feeling very thirsty, feeling very tired, losing weight, cuts or wounds healing slowly, and blurred vision. But in the long run, what effect does too much sugar in the blood have on the body? Over time, high blood glucose levels cause damage to both nerves and blood vessels. Small blood vessels, like capillaries, become damaged and leaky, whilst fatty plaques develop in large blood vessels called arteries, obstructing blood flow. Overall, this reduces blood circulation to your peripheries and organs. Prolonged exposure to high blood glucose damages nerves, stopping them from transmitting impulses. Nerve and blood vessel damage are responsible for causing various problems around the body. If you have type 2 diabetes, you have nearly twice the risk of developing cardiovascular disease. And diabetes is the primary cause of 1/4 of kidney failures. Almost 2/3 of type 2 diabetes patients will have some degree of retinopathy. This is when blood vessels supplying the retina are damaged, and it can lead to blurry vision and even blindness. Up to 50% of patients will suffer from nerve damage, which can lead to serious foot problems such as ulcers and even lower leg amputations. Type 2 diabetes patients are more likely to develop complications such as pneumonia if they catch the flu. And females with type 2 diabetes are more likely to have complications during pregnancy. It's clear that diabetes is a serious and potentially debilitating disease. So you're probably wondering, who's at risk of developing type 2 diabetes? You're at a high risk of developing type 2 diabetes if you are obese or have a body mass index of over 30. Even if you have a healthy BMI, a large waist circumference of more than 80 centimeters in women and more than 90 centimeters in men can put you at a high risk of developing type 2 diabetes. When you reach the age of 40, your metabolism starts to slow down, and it's easier to put on weight, so our risk also increases with age. If one of your family, such as your mum, dad or sibling, has type 2 diabetes, you're more likely to develop it too. You're also more at risk if you have high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes is 2 to 4 times more likely in people of South Asian descent and African Caribbean descent. But these risk factors only increase your chances of developing type 2 diabetes, meaning that you can be diagnosed without being in one of these high-risk groups. You don't have to be obese or have a BMI of over 30 to develop type 2 diabetes. The progression and onset of diabetes is slow, and although you may not be at high risk now, your unhealthy lifestyle choices today could negatively impact your health later in life. Some of us are more high risk than others, but technically we are all at risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So, whether you are at high risk or not, now is the best time for you to take preventive action. And it really is simple. Get out and about, watch what you eat, and stop those unhealthy habits. 30 minutes a day of moderate intensity exercise at least 5 days a week can reduce your risk. Moderate intensity doesn't mean running a marathon. It could mean getting off the bus a stop earlier, or simply taking the stairs instead of the lift. It is also important to do activities that increase your muscle tone and strength at least 2 days a week. You don't have to lift weights in the gym, but it can include everyday activities like gardening or carrying shopping. Research shows that sitting less is also really important. Instead of sitting on the bus, stand up. And if you're sat in front of the TV, do some stretches or chores whilst the adverts are on. It's also really important to watch what you eat. Firstly, go easy on the salt. You should be having less than a teaspoon of salt a day, and by eating less salt, you can lower your blood pressure. Foods that have lots of added salt include sauces and condiments, processed foods from cheese to takeaways, snacks such as crisps, and even packets of biscuits. Secondly, eating too much saturated fat can increase your type 2 diabetes risk, as it leads to fat building up around our organs. So it's a good idea to swap processed meats like sausages and bacon for avocados and oily fish like salmon. Watch out for sugar. Just like salt, a lot of added sugar is put into processed foods. So, for a sweet fix, swap cakes and sweets for plain yogurts and fruit. A lot of sugar can also be found in our drinks. Although 1 of your 5 a day, fruit juices are very high in sugar. Skip out adding sugar to your teas and coffees, and go easy on the fizzy drinks too. Finally, stop those unhealthy habits. By drinking heavily, excess alcohol can cause the pancreas to become inflamed and reduce the amount of insulin it produces, increasing your type 2 diabetes risk. Alcohol also contains a huge amount of calories. 1 pint of lager is equivalent to a slice of pizza. Beware the booze and drink sensibly. Smoking raises your blood pressure and increases insulin resistance. If you stop smoking, you will reduce your risk of developing type 2 diabetes, amongst a number of other diseases. It is more important than ever before for everyone to take preventative action, especially as the prevalence of type 2 diabetes is the highest it has ever been. Did you know that we are currently facing a type 2 diabetes epidemic in the UK? There are currently 3.5 million people living with diabetes in the UK, and this is double the number of cases recorded 20 years ago. On top of this, there are around 1.1 million people who have not yet been diagnosed and are unaware they have diabetes. Due to increasing levels of obesity, there are also set to be a further 11.9 million people at an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. If current trends persist, in England, 1 in 3 people will be obese by 2034, and 1 in 10 will develop type 2 diabetes. We can't let this type 2 diabetes epidemic continue. Now is the best time for you to alter your lifestyle and, regardless of your risk, take preventative action. Will you be one of those 3 in 5 cases of type 2 diabetes that could have been prevented? Remember, reduce your risk of developing type 2 diabetes today by doing 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise at least 5 days a week, increasing your muscle tone, and sitting less. Reduce your intake of the 3 S's: salt, saturated fat, and sugar. And drink alcohol responsibly and stop smoking. For more information, you can either visit the Diabetes UK website, the NHS website, or speak to your GP.